Okay, you can hear me okay? Okay, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Rowena Brown. Proud East Bay native. Grew up playing in East Oakland parks to living, working, and playing in this beautiful city of Oakland for about 2 decades. I am someone who, lost both of my parents at an early age. And even with that, I was still able to navigate the public school system, Laney College, Mills College right here in East Oakland, as well as law school just across the bay at UC Hastings. And I've kind of served in various roles here in the city of Oakland. I used to be a licensed optician, did work in OUSD schools, also taught civics education in an East Oakland school, and then kind of the work that I've been really fond of in the last kind of 5 to 8 years. I actually serve this community where this library is as the constituent coordinator for the District 6 council member 2019 to 2021. And in my current role now, I serve as district director to State Assembly member Mia Bonta, and just really been focused on delivering results for communities across the city of Oakland, running for Oakland City Council at large to really just bring some positive changes to the community here in Oakland, focused on safety in all its forms, right? Public safety, pedestrian safety, bike safety, all the things that are really important to us, addressing homelessness, helping to support our small businesses throughout the city. And so these are all things that I'll be focused on starting day one, and really look forward to engaging more with you. Thank you so much for hosting this forum.
Hello, my name is Mindy Pechenuk, and I'm an outsider. I didn't grow up here in East Oakland or Oakland. I've only lived here 7 years, but I have 50 years experience of organizing throughout the country around the policies that I say the founding fathers started this country on, which is the principles that we're all created equal in the image of God. And God gave us a beautifully creative mind to develop through scientific and cultural progress a future for future generations. And that's been a guiding principle of mine since I've been about 8 years old, when my grandmother said to me, you have to leave this world a better place than when you found it. And that's guided me through the years. Now, what I'll say is also, which sort of differentiates me, is that I'm a Donald Trump supporter. And I welcome all questions from anybody. Why would I support Donald Trump? Well, for the same reasons I'm running for Oakland City Council. And I also ran, as Rowena probably know, I ran against Mia Bonta twice for State Assembly. But look, it's time to bring Oakland out of the dark age into the space age. It's time to bring in the kind of industrial development and manufacturing that was once key to Oakland. I'm a trained classical musician by training. And I know the importance of the creative mind from that standpoint. And I also know that if we're going to get rid of crime, we have to, and I've done 4 ride-alongs, tomorrow will be my 5th with the 4 with the East Oakland Police and 1 with the West Oakland Police. And their hands are tied by the ordinances of this city. And we need a city council at-large person who's going to get rid of those ordinances, the oversight committees, and is going to go after the drug cartels. No more baby steps. That's my approach. You have to go to the source and the root of the problem. And that means getting into this budget, and I can talk more about it as we get the questions. But we have to get rid of the derivative speculation which has strangled this city. So since my time is up, I'll pass it over to my colleague.
Thanks, Mindy. Hi, everyone.
Turn it back on.
Hello, everyone. My name is Charlene. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm someone who's worked on as a public policymaker on a lot of different social issues, everything from environmental justice to education, healthcare, and yes, transportation. So I'm really excited that this forum is featuring this topic in particular. I am just excited, and we'll dive into those questions to talk more about transportation. In general, what my platform and what this campaign is about is I'm running on public safety as just a prime priority that we need to have here in Oakland, alongside housing and reforming a broken homelessness response system, as well as finally providing inclusive economic development here in Oakland that is going to generate the tax revenue that we need for so many of the services that we require here in Oakland, as well as ultimately uplifting our most disadvantaged communities through things like clean manufacturing and green manufacturing jobs. Excuse me. Sorry, excuse me. It's been a long day. Anyhow, I'm excited to talk about this, as well as my work at the Department of Transportation, where I actually stood up a $4 billion program called the Reconnecting Communities Initiative that actually restored communities that were segregated and raised by the highway system. It's funding incredible projects here in Oakland, like reconnecting West Oakland to the downtown area, as well as the East Bay Greenway, connecting Lake Merritt all the way down to San Leandro and beyond. So excited to be talking more about transportation, and I will pass it off to my colleague, Erin. Oh, and I'm running for the at-large seat, to be clear.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As the only person at this table who's running for City Council District 5, I'd like to welcome you all to this lovely district. I actually live just down the street with my wife and my 3-year-old daughter, and this is our local library, and we're here very often. So it's nice to see you all here, and I'm happy to be here today as well. But I've got to be honest, I wouldn't be running for City Council District 5 if I felt that things were going well in this city. The current incumbent, Noel Gaio, has been in office now for 32 years. He's been on the city council for 12. And in that time, our streets have gotten filthier and our neighborhoods less safe. I don't know about you, but I've tried to call his office for a variety of things, and he's never picked up the phone. He's never returned my call. And as part of my campaign, I've knocked on over 4,000 doors in District 5, and I've talked to hundreds of people all across the district. Residents, businesses, community groups, nonprofits, you name it, and they all tell me the same thing. They're hungry for a council member who's going to fight for them, who's going to pick up their calls and answer their phone, who's going to show up when they need, and who understands how to tackle the root causes of the problems we face, not just tinker around the edges. And for the last 8 years, I've been the senior policy advisor to Alameda County Supervisor Nate Miley, and that's exactly what I've done. Whether it's the production and preservation of affordable housing, improving our mental health care systems, tackling illegal dumping, or improving public safety, I've been in the trenches getting results for the last 8 years. And now I'm looking to bring that same tenacity and zeal and fresh ideas to the City Council District 5, because like I said, we can't keep tinkering around the edges. We can't keep doing the same thing and expect different results. And that's why I'm running, and that's why I'm asking for your support.
I'm going to stand up just so I can project. Hey everyone, I'm Shawn Danino. I use he and they pronouns. Running on a deeply pro-housing, pro-mobility platform for the Oakland City Council at large seat. I spent the last 5 years at the State Housing Department, where I planned for the construction of over 250,000 homes, got the Rockridge neighborhood desegregated and rezoned to accommodate an additional 5,000 mixed income homes in an area that used to not allow Jewish families like mine to buy into the neighborhood. I know that crossing the street is incredibly dangerous, and it should not be the most dangerous thing we do, but it absolutely is across so many parts of Oakland. Walkability shouldn't be a privilege that only wealthier, whiter neighborhoods enjoy, but unfortunately that is the case right now. I also want to acknowledge something, that cars are incredibly expensive. The median spend in California is between 28 to 40 bucks per day. And there are people who spend more than half of their net income just to be able to afford to move around this city. So we're long overdue to build our cities for people and not for cars. We need to be planning human scale development, and that's why on day one, I'm going to be proposing a neighborhood market policy to re-legalize garage businesses and allow for more shops to lower the cost of starting a small business and make it more accessible to start small businesses and allow us to engage in our community. I'm also running on a 4-day workweek platform, as well as a zero displacement housing program. I come with the endorsement of the Sierra Club, the Pro Housing Democratic Caucus, East Bay for Everyone, and many others. No one will be a better advocate for transit and mobility justice. I'm deeply committed to this cause and this work, and I can thread the needle between these issues of economic and environmental justice, as well as making sure that Oakland's the most affordable and accessible version of itself. So hope to earn your vote. Thanks so much for your time.
We'll ask the first question from over here. Thank you.
Wires. Okay. We have 6 questions prepared, many submitted by people ahead of time. The first, speeding and reckless driving is out of control in Oakland. This is a public health emergency. 2 Oaklanders are killed or severely injured in our streets every week. If elected, how specifically will you protect people walking and biking from drivers, and how will you accelerate the time to deliver traffic calming or safety improvements beyond the multiple years it takes for capital projects to be built?
This is a great question, and it also is a part of the work that I had the privilege of doing when I worked for the City of Oakland, working alongside the Department of Transportation, alongside the local community, as well as the council member as well that represented the district, and that's really what it takes to actually impact change in our communities. And so our local Department of Transportation has gone after many grants to help improve traffic calming measures. We know that that's what it takes. I also know that it takes some time to find the engineers in order to complete these critical projects. And so would really want to, I had the opportunity to work on redesigning the Bancroft corridor from 60th on down to 73rd with the urban planning students from UC Berkeley. And so I believe that specifically it's going to take partnership across all jurisdictions to really help bring these specific improvements to help calm the traffic in our neighborhoods throughout the city.
Well, the first thing I would do is change the city ordinances that tie the hands of our police. I think the reason you have a lot of accidents, and I know this from the ride-alongs I've done, is that you can't, because as a driver or passenger, how many times do you see people running red lights or sideswipe and come right across your car and cut you off and don't pay any respect for pedestrians? Well, the police can't do anything about it. Not because they don't want to, but because the city ordinances make it so that they can't go after people. And that, of course, yes, it is true. They can't chase anybody over 50 miles an hour. If they do, they have to get permission from their commander. And police don't want to be liable. They're liable. And most people who run the red lights, who cause the accidents, know that they're not going to be chased. So I know my time is up, but thank you.
Mindy, you keep on turning off the thing. Anyways, no, I'm kidding. I'm just giving you crap. Anyways, so this is such an important question because we do have some of the highest rates of pedestrian traffic violence here in Oakland. I'm proud to say that, as someone who was with the Biden administration from day one, that I actually helped to shape the infrastructure package that ultimately passed Congress. However, some of the disappointment that we achieved as people, or we had as people inside the administration, was actually that so much of the funding to get through a bipartisan Congress wound up being geared towards highways and traditional infrastructure. And so I'm proud to say that within the administration, we did a lot of pushing to ensure that we had more transit, Vision Zero policies, things like that. And I noticed, for example, Oakland, I don't believe we're yet to be in the Vision Zero network, which is something that we really need to advance here in Oakland and make it a priority. I also worked for actually Michelle Wu, who's now the mayor, when she was a council member, in part because she was advocating for free transit as well as really advancing bus lanes and bike lanes. And so that's the sort of thing I want to actually bring those lessons learned. One of the things I worked on with her was actually restructuring the Public Works and Transportation Department to deliver quicker on bus lanes and bike lanes, and actually really advancing a quick build model. I think that's something that we really need to look into. I know the AC Transit is doing that with the Department of Transportation, but I think there's more to go. And I think I'm out of time. So.
So this is a really big issue, especially here in District 5, and there's a few things. I mean, we're right here on Foothill. This has been a major corridor where before the recent improvements, people would just go right down the middle of the road. And I tell you, because you know, I take my kid, my little 3-year-old, to Cesar Chavez Park, and we would have to cross the road. It was always incredibly dangerous, and we've had many pedestrian deaths in the neighborhood as a result. The traffic improvements that have come in, the little islands and the crossing things, those came in 18 months late. So they put the signs up saying, oh, it's coming, but it came 18 months late. And part of that was that the city was really behind on a lot of its planning and contracting and things like that. And so we have to get those types of processes fixed so that we can deliver on projects quicker. The other piece is, this is a policy tweak that I want to make, but if you live in a residential neighborhood and you are requesting a speed bump, it should be automatically approved. Right now, you have to get 80% of the people living on your street to sign it. That's too much. It's too much bureaucracy, and we need to make this a lot quicker.
Great. And just to clarify, we have 1 minute, right? Okay. And when I hear that beeper, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, so my mother uses a wheelchair, and I know that our sidewalks are not well built for people. That's why I'm going to be proposing, within the first 6 months of being elected, a mobility lanes program for not just bikes, but for people who use wheelchairs, people who use scooters. We need to plan our cities for people and not for cars. Now, how will I fund this work? I'm going to talk about the Federal Highway Administration. They fund projects orders of magnitude larger than what local governments can fund. And that funding is actually a lot more flexible than we realize. Quick show of hands, how many of you have been on State Route 37? Let the record show no hands went up. This is a highway that connects Sonoma County to a part of Marin County, and we spent $8.7 billion on that project. That's billion with a B. So when we hear about the money that goes into bike lanes and projects like this, we need to understand that the federal government is spending insane amounts of money subsidizing vehicles. We need to be decentering the single occupancy vehicle and planning our cities for people and not for cars.
All right, our second question is, many neighborhoods in Oakland are zoned exclusively for single-family homes, and residents consequently have no convenient access to grocery stores, shops, or other communal spaces. What are your ideas to improve access to retail, medical clinics, and other daily needs for residents in these neighborhoods? And let's walk it back. Oops, sorry. Actually, yeah, if you all don't mind, let's send it back down the line that way.
Yeah, so these zoning questions are really close to my heart because even in cities like Oakland, where we've made a ton of progress, the vast majority of our zones are only for detached single-family homes. Those are extremely expensive to build. That is why I'm going to be proposing a zero displacement housing program that allows for stacked townhomes where there are only single-family homes, and we will make sure that the original owner gets to so they could stay rooted inside of the community. On day one, I'll be passing a neighborhood markets policy. This is often referred to as an accessory commercial use. use, there's no reason that we shouldn't be able to operate businesses out of our garages when they're appropriately permitted. That can lower the entry cost of starting a business, that can make our communities far more walkable. There is so much work that can be done, and I just want to say, if you want to do something evil, hide it in something really boring. There is nothing more boring than zoning, and we need somebody with the appetite for these deep cuts on how to re-legalize naturally affordable housing that goes across the city. So many of the homes surrounding areas like Adams Point would be fully illegal to build under today's zoning rules, and I think that that's a huge policy failure. Let's elect the person who has the appetite to undo these rules and, legalize housing and ACUs.
Thank you for the question. Actually, part of the reason that my wife and I chose to live in District 5 was that we wanted to live in a neighborhood where we didn't have to drive everywhere. And so that was something that was really important to us when we were looking to buy our forever home. And I'm so grateful that we found it here in District 5 because there's so many great businesses along the Foothill corridor. We can go right down to East 14th. There's amazing businesses there. We've got public transit that can take me right downtown with BART and the BRT. And it's a real shame that not all of the neighborhoods across the city of Oakland are able to have the same level of walkability and be able to, walk to a corner store to pick up some groceries instead of having to jump in your car and drive, a couple miles to a grocery store. So I do think that we have to look at our zoning laws and just make sure that we're having, commercial zoning where it makes sense so that people can access businesses and build them right into the community. I think that's something that is really important.
This is a great question. So one of the things I'm running on is a cultural district model, and the reason I put that in place is actually because I noticed that a lot of our development is centered in the downtown area, right? A lot of the amenities that folks need are centered there. So this cultural district model is really intended to spur development throughout Oakland, including in East Oakland, West Oakland, et cetera, in a way that actually ensures that we're also not going to displace those very residents through gentrification. I will say that earlier on in my campaign, I was actually studying the zoning map of Oakland, and one of the things that I noticed when it comes to mixed-use development, for example, mixed-use zoning, which I do think we have a lot of opportunities for that here in Oakland, is that we have some of that already in place along some of the major, I call it the east-west corridor, but there's also major corridors that go vertically throughout Oakland, especially out in East Oakland. I'm talking about 73rd Avenue, High Street, other places like that, where I see opportunities to put in smart, thoughtful ways to put in more of those commercial spaces. And also, finally, I think medical stuff and medical clinics are incredibly important. I'm interested actually in ensuring that some of our existing clinics get what is called a federally qualified health care center status, which ensures that more resources come in and really can help those who are uninsured, which we know that there's a lot of folks like that here in Oakland.
Well, I'll do my best in a minute, which is, of course, the zoning things have to be changed. I'm always a believer that, you should be able to have a community which has everything it needs around it, including culture, including development. But that's why I have a great vision to create $100 million investment bank for Oakland, to bring in a totally new design for the entire city. Because that's how we have to think of it. We have to have a vision for an entirely different Oakland. You're not going to clean up East Oakland step by step by step. We have to have a top-down approach. And that's why I go back to that we have to clean the derivatives. People don't realize how much of Wall Street and the derivative holdings is killing Oakland. And it's massive. There's a report I've been reading, very detailed on this, where, most of the debt we have is tied to that, and we need to get rid of that and get back to a program which will allow the kind of $100 million vision I have to rebuild the entire city. So I'll leave it at that.
Yep, thank you so much for asking this very important question. This is actually linked to one of the many reasons why I'm actually running for Oakland City Council, and it had to do with the feedback that I got from East Oaklanders and West Oaklanders around the food deserts that are present in multiple communities and neighborhoods in our city. There's no walkability in all of our neighborhoods, and similarly, there is also lack of, there's not a bank, and different things that you need just to live in your neighborhood. And so I'm focused in on ensuring that whether this is through the various, you'll notice that most of the business improvement districts here in the city of Oakland are located closer to the downtown area. And so some of the work that I'm really interested in doing is ensuring that, for example, here in East Oakland, where they're really establishing a MacArthur bid, and then even in West Oakland, there is no grocery store. And so these are all things that I'm going to be focused in on, ensuring that in these pockets, in these neighborhoods, you actually can have everything that you need in order to live.
Many of Oakland's streets were built around streetcar lines and heavy automobile use prior to the construction of Oakland's freeways. As a historical consequence of this, many of our major corridors are excessively wide, encouraging speeding and increasing the frequency of deadly collisions. How will you empower and resource OakDOT to reduce this violence?
That's the Oakland Department of Transportation.
Excellent. Another great question. I also had the opportunity to work very closely with the OakDOT team on issues as this. And so we know that a lot of times it really just boils down to street design and really being intentional. One of the examples that I'll kind of give is, that we were kind of working on was around, similar to the Mandela Parkway and how wide that street is, and kind of the development out there is you can bike and walk in the middle, and then you have the lanes on the side. And so that was something that was actually being envisioned out for the Bancroft corridor as well, right? Actually creating spaces where both the cars, pedestrians, and those who are on bikes can you could have that in your neighborhoods. And so I think the best way to empower OakDOT to do that is, it also boils down to the grants that they go after, and ensuring that they have the resources to help impact this in the various neighborhoods across the city of Oakland.
Well, one thing I would encourage the city to do and the transportation DOT to do is we need to pave our streets. One of the big problems if you drive around Oakland is that the lack of maintenance of the streets for anybody, whether you're driving your car, whether you're walking, whether you're biking, and that is a big hazard. And there's no reason for the city not to be paving and have a big project which would increase the capability for actual safety for the citizens. And we can afford to do all this. We can afford to build, when part of the thing is if you're going to reconstruct East Oakland, you're going to create new streets. In fact, I think we don't need all these barriers you have. It actually makes it difficult because if somebody's trying to get to a bus and they're on this side of the street and they've got to manage these barriers that are in the middle, it's actually dangerous for people trying to cross the street. So I think we need a bigger vision to make a completely different kind of way that we think about the transportation. And so I know my time is up, so I'll pass it over.
So I'm someone who doesn't have a car, and every day as I travel around, I think about just how much our city is designed to be car-centric. I think one way that city leadership need to empower OakDOT is to just withstand the way that there's blowback whenever you want to install protected bike lanes and bus lanes, et cetera. I have read, for example, Jeanette Sadiq-Khan's Street Fight, which illustrates exactly the kind of leadership you need if you want to put in place these sort of policies, including in Oakland. I would say the other thing that I'm interested in doing, this is just a very tactical thing that needs to be done, is we know that OakDOT has a high rate of vacancies, which prevents Oakland from moving forward. There's a lack of, for example, contract staff to oversee contracts. When I have seen that as part of the barrier, one of the things that occurs to me is I'd like to look at centralizing some of the administrative functions. That way people at OakDOT can really concentrate on being subject matter experts and really focus on implementing transportation policy and going out to the neighborhood, doing community planning, rather than spending their time on these sort of admin functions. And the other thing is at the federal government, there's an interesting model called an IPA where you bring in people from other governments, from higher education institutions, for just interesting ways. It's people who've been thinking about, who can provide some of that thought leadership and bring them into the department temporarily. So thanks so much.
Thank you for this question. I'd actually like to invite everyone who's here when you're leaving today to go and look at 38th Avenue. It's just down the street. You take Foothill, it's right down there. This used to be a 4-lane highway going through a residential neighborhood. 4-lane highway. And so even when it was redesigned recently, it now has 2 bike lanes, 1 on each side, it has parking on each side, and it has 2 traffic lanes in it. It's still incredibly wide. We actually call it the drag, because what people will do is they'll come and they'll do donuts on one side, and then they'll go flying up the hill, running all the stop signs, and then do donuts on the other side. And then they'll come back. They'll do the loop. So this is exactly why addressing these types of historic infrastructure mistakes, I think, is really important, because these are transportation, these are residential neighborhoods. We don't need huge 4-lane highways going right through the middle. And so when we are redesigning these streets, we need to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is actually restorative, that's either widening the sidewalks or putting medians in the middle, something like that.
All right, this is going to be the most woo-woo thing I say as part of any candidate forum, but I live right off of San Pablo, and the key route used to run down the middle of San Pablo, and oftentimes I feel the ghosts of those wonderful streetcars that used to populate our city that we stripped out for all of the wrong reasons. I'm a big believer in reviving the streetcar network. I think there's plenty of money in FHWA dollars to do that, but for now, a lower hanging fruit is engaging in plans like AC Transit's Realign program to get bus rapid transit routes in our city to make sure that our lowest income residents are being able to be served by our transit network. As part of my mobility lanes program, there will be a ministerial over-the-counter approval process. If you've ever been on Telegraph around where Burma Superstar and Cholita Linda are in the Temescal corridor, you'll notice that next to those outside dining spaces, they put the bike lane on the inside, closer to the sidewalk. Anytime you see a bike lane on the outside, you know that that bike is subject to getting doored, subject to getting murdered. We need to narrow the right of way. We need to make sure that cars are able to drive in places that are more naturally narrow. And I have to acknowledge something that Mindy said about the repaving our roads. It costs $2 million to pave every lane mile of road. So a street like San Pablo with 4 lanes, oh yeah, I'm way over time. $8 million per mile, we could spend the money much better.
Let's do the same thing again. I'll ask the question from over here and send it back down the line. Okay, question number 4 is, illegal dumping is a chronic issue along Oakland streets, parks, and sidewalks, often hindering accessibility for wheelchair users when narrow sidewalks are blocked. What are your ideas for addressing this issue?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, illegal dumping is a very real issue, and I'm going to make a recommendation that I made to Rowena when we got coffee a few weeks back. Everyone in this room should read The Death and Life of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs. It's a foundational urban planning book, and one of the most important ideas in it is that we need eyes on the street and a mix of daytime and nighttime uses to drive public safety. Too much of Oakland does not look like this, particularly in this area where we put all of the manufacturing, we made our roads way too wide, and it also happens to be one of the most black and brown parts of the city. We need that mix of daytime and nighttime uses. I'm also a big believer that we should be using technology. We should be using things like cameras to make sure that folks aren't doing things like dumping. I think sometimes there's an unfortunate overemphasis on police officers with guns, which are also insanely expensive for the city budget. Depending on your math, something like $400,000 per officer across the city. So I think we couldn't be enforcing our laws much more efficiently. I think we need to be building a city that's for people and not for cars, narrowing the right of way, having more neighborhood markets, eyes on the street, read Jane Jacobs.
Thank you. As the leader of the Alameda County Illegal Dumping Task Force, I've actually had the opportunity to be addressing this issue directly for many years now. And the way that we approach it is called the 3 E's. It's education, eradication, and enforcement. We view these as 3 critical elements to actually address illegal dumping. It's prevention, it's removing it quickly, and it's holding people accountable when they misbehave. So in East Oakland, we've actually adopted over 2 miles of roadway out on Railroad Avenue between 85th and 98th, as well as G Street. And we started developing best practices that could be replicated and scaled throughout the city. So we've planted out there over 150 trees. We fixed all the streetlights, we improved the curbs and the fencing, and that actually started to prevent illegal dumping. We empowered our local businesses and residents because they were already picking up the dumping in front of their homes and their businesses, but then they were having to pay to take it to the dump. And so we made it so they could get rid of that garbage quickly, effectively, and for free. And so that gets it off the street very, very quickly. And the last thing that we did is we installed cameras, and we held over 100 people accountable, and they get community service coming up and picking up on those same streets.
Thanks. So, yeah, this is an important environmental justice issue because the trash is also collecting in our most underserved neighborhoods. One of the things that we do have is something called environmental enforcement officers. We don't have enough. It's actually been documented in the Oakland side that unfortunately the cameras have not been effective in terms of actually preventing the illegal dumping. So I think one of the things we need to do is actually invest in the people personnel, and we could do it by going after environmental justice grants at the EPA, as well as workforce development grants. One of the things that I'm running on is actually to employ those who are unhoused, get them housing, but also employ them in living wage jobs to do things like pick up trash, plant trees, do things like that we need here in the city anyways, right? And by having this all-inclusive approach, we're also more likely to get access to the grants that we need. At AmeriCorps, they also have a program now for an environmental justice corps where I think we can work with AmeriCorps, for example, to get young folks, fellows, and whatnot to help do that role of the environmental enforcement officers. And then the final thing that I just want to mention too is part of the issues are waste collection fees are some of the highest in the country. We need to really re-explore that in a renegotiation around that contract. The other thing is there's something called a bulk pickup option that we have that is per person, but we can make that, one suggestion would be to make that transferable for those who don't wind up using this bulk pickup option here in Oakland. All right, thanks so much.
Well, the first thing that needs to be done is to get to the root cause. Why do we have people dumping? And that gets to the question of, we have to rebuild the actual city itself. You can do temporary measures like others have said on the panel. But to really get it back, we have to actually recreate a new Oakland. And stop, I don't think people realize, people talk about money. This Oakland's tax swamp, Goldman Sachs, cost the city $50.8 million. You have right now, the city has 1.5 million of the city's swap losses that are directly result of the LIBOR fraud. So if you want to get to why we have these problems, we got to deal with this. And we need to, it's not rocket science to hire more garbage collectors. It's not a question of cost. It's a question of need. And instead of bailing out Wall Street and a lot of the NGOs, if we got into our budget and redirect it, we could stop it and create a mission for people in East Oakland so they see a future that they can have. Thanks.
Great question, and similar to Erin, I also had the opportunity to work in this on illegal dumping, and so this is what I know. The current waste management contract actually says that waste management is actually the only authorized hauler in the city of Oakland, and so with a lot of things happening in our city, it does boil down to an enforcement and lack of, and so that'll be something that I'm going to be really focused in on. Also was around when those environmental enforcement officers first took their role, and I do think that they're attempting to do great work, but the other thing that was supposed to be in partnership with that was the investment that the city council made in a couple $100,000 for cameras for these illegal dumping hotspots. And so I'll be checking in with the public works department to get an understanding of what is the status of those cameras, so that we can really try to address and get to the root cause of who is doing the dumping in our city. And kind of similar to what some of the other folks said, also investing in ensuring that our community has access to get rid of their excess trash in the best way, because that is indeed possible. Each city council member actually has access, I think, to 5 to 8 bins that they can put up in different neighborhoods to actually help mitigate that work as well.
Might I propose we start in the middle just to give other folks a chance to speak
For
first?
sure. All right, let's do that. And Laura, would you like to ask questions?
All right. Community members in the San Antonio neighborhood have been organizing to gain access to public transportation via a new infill BART station between Fruitvale and Coliseum stations. Do you support an infill BART station in San Antonio? If so, how do you plan to support the project?
And let's start with Charlene.
Yeah, I've signed the pledge to support that project. I'm really excited by it, especially as someone who lives by that neighborhood. This is an area of Oakland that is also incredibly underserved. It's an incredibly diverse community, and also one that's incredibly, I've used incredibly a lot, but transit dependent. And so I think putting a infill station there just makes a lot of sense. I think the challenge that's going to be presented for that project, of course, is the fact that BART is facing a fiscal cliff. And so there's going to be issues with getting money. So luckily, I am someone, for example, who has worked at the U.S. Department of Transportation and knows what kind of grants we need to apply for. I can already think of the TOD pilot planning grant with the FTA. That's something we obviously should apply for. And I would say, too, ways that we can actually think about the project is, since it's adjacent also to the 880, I think there's the potential to argue that that project could actually reconnect that community actually to the shoreline, too. And so I'm happy to say that the project, or the program that I stood up, the Reconnecting Communities Initiative, is another program that I think, if proposed correctly, that project could apply for, as well as other grant programs that are available to get ultimately not just planning funds, but also capital construction funds. The other thing that I would want to work with that team that's working on that project is just ensure that we're doing community engagement in Vietnamese and Spanish to ensure that those communities are being included in the process. So, but otherwise, big fan of the effort and would love to see it happen. Which way?
So I would be supportive of this in so much as the community is supportive of this. This is not, the San Antonio neighborhood is right outside of my district, so they're our neighbors, and obviously we want to support them. One of the things that I think about this project, obviously I personally would love to see it. I'm not going to shove it down the throat of people who don't want it, and so I'd like to see like a community survey or something like that to show what people want. The other piece, though, that we have to think about is the jurisdiction and who has ultimately the responsibility to implement something like this. And so that would be the BART district. It's not something that the city of Oakland can do. It's not something that the city council has the authority to do. And so I'm somebody who wants to get the city to make sure we're staying in our lane and focusing on the things that we can control. So obviously I'm not going to stand in the way. Planning is going to have to be involved. We'd have to work very closely, but ultimately BART has to be the one taking the lead.
Yeah, so the stretch which San Antonio Station will serve, the stretch of BART, does not have a stop, and it's one of the longest stretches without a stop in the city of Oakland, in an obvious form of environmental racism. This is one of the blackest and brownest parts of the city. They deserve a BART station. BART is much more naturally affordable than car ownership. It's much more environmentally sustainable. I've endorsed the San Antonio Station Alliance. There's some social media posts about it. So absolutely, I can help to leverage the funding as part of my role at the State Housing Department. I help leverage $500 million in grants to finance the construction of affordable backyard homes. I'm also very familiar with Federal Highway Administration money and the way we can leverage that much more efficiently. I think it's important to understand that we are in an environmental crisis. We have until 2030 to get our act together to get to net zero carbon emissions. So with due respect to other folks on the stage, I think that honestly, in many circumstances, community outreach we're much better off working backwards from the outcomes that we want rather than asking questions where certain special interests can crowd the conversation out. Big supporter of BART. We should rapidly expand mass transit in several forms.
Well, I've always been a big supporter of mass transit. I grew up in New York City, and that's how you got around New York City. It was an incredible system. From buses to trains, you could get around. But, so we should have it. But we're not going to get any of this stuff unless we deal with the fundamental. the fact that this city is bankrupt. And you can bring in all the grants you want, but it's not going to work. And I have to say, I don't believe that we need to be net carbon zero by 2030. And I think we need to put our resources into developing. Yes, I do think this area needs a lot more infrastructure, but that's part of the plan. If you're going to build industrialization, you're going to bring in manufacturing. That begs a whole different question. And that begs, we talked about garbage dumping before. I just wanted to say one thing. We should stop fentanyl dumping. That's killing a lot more people. And we need to deal with this as a serious question. So, mass transit is a beautiful thing. I think we can afford it all if we clean out the debt from Wall Street and everything else. Thank you.
Okay, yes, I've definitely been a supporter of this project. As I mentioned, I currently work for the state assembly member, and so the group reached out to our office, and so we did a couple things. We helped assist with some of the research by gifting them one of our interns from the office to support with research on the project and what would be some of the key stakeholders, even giving them kind of a breakdown around, how do you become a nonprofit, and then even creating a spreadsheet around some of the grants that they could potentially go after. And so definitely in huge support, and then we gave some recommendations around who would be some of the key stakeholders that they should reach out to, because similar to what Erin mentioned is that yes, you want to make sure that your local electeds are supportive of this work, but it's really going to be the BART board of directors as well as funding from the state level as well. And so I do think that the group has an amazing roadmap towards success, but it will take a community effort as well.
All right, the last question is, the Oakland Department of Transportation reports that Black Oaklanders are 3 times as likely to be killed or severely injured while walking as compared to all other Oaklanders, and that majority Asian census tracts have the highest percentage of streets in the high injury network of any ethnicity. How does a city with such an interest in equity end up with such disparate impacts for its residents, and what would you do to make streets in places like East Oakland, West Oakland, and Chinatown safer?
Thank you. I love this question because that was the project that I got to work on when I worked on behalf of the East Oakland community around these high injury network corridors and working together with a team to help redesign our streets. And so what specifically am I interested in doing? Just prioritizing, for example, raised crosswalks, the rapid flashing beacons, and also increasing crossing times, and then even just things as simple as traffic circles. We saw major improvements in the Havens Court community around, just folks that were flying up and down that street. We installed traffic circles, and that community has seen quite a reduction in, fatalities in that area. But we know that there is a long list of streets in the city of Oakland that are in that high injury network. And so I'm going to be 100% focused in on trying to bring those improvements to neighborhoods in East and West Oakland. It's one of my top priorities.
Well, clearly we want a safe Oakland for all our Oaklanders. There's no question about that. And I think one of the things, and I'm going to answer in a little different way, as I've done most of the night, which is that you got to get rid of the drugs. You got so much drugs in this city, and it has an effect. We need to definitely build, I can see many areas of much, different kinds of roads. You can do all this kind of infrastructure. We can put up the technology. But we have to deal with human beings and what's happened to our population. And especially if you go through, I don't have to tell you here, East Oakland, it's inhuman. And we need to address that to really solve these problems. So I know I'm about to run out of time, so I'm going to leave my answer there and pass it over.
Thanks, Mindy, for keeping it on. But anyways, we do need, it doesn't surprise me because this is just a result of decades of environmental racism and disinvestment in these communities, right? And so, I would love to explore lowering the speed limits in some of these neighborhoods. I know that's been done already. We also need traffic enforcement through speed cameras, things like that. The other thing I will say is we rely on something called SeeClickFix, which I think is a really important model, but we also know that communities like Black, Asian, Latino communities are those that are going to be least empowered to actually use that sort of app, right? So we need to make sure that we have systems in place here in Oakland that are going to address some of those inequities of the most disenfranchised communities that don't feel like, they're not thinking about, they're just trying to survive. They're not thinking around reporting things on SeeClickFix. Finally, what I'm really excited to do is actually integrate the cultural district model that I'm running on to actually put in some of these traffic calming elements in a way that celebrates heritage. I was actually at the Federal Highway Administration, did something, updated the MUTCD, which only this crowd knows about. What's exciting is now we can incorporate painting, things like that. And so I think it'll be exciting to, usually bike lanes get associated with gentrification, for example, but we can celebrate respective heritages. Right, thanks. I will talk about this with you afterwards, okay?
So how did the city get there, right? So, as Charlene mentioned, the SeeClickFix Act app, and we've seen this with illegal dumping, that's utilized much more heavily in affluent communities than it is in communities that have been underserved and disenfranchised. And so if the services are only based on the citizens asking for requests through things like SeeClickFix, where are the services going to be provided? It's in the more affluent neighborhoods. Policies like this, while maybe well-intentioned to try and empower residents, have this negative consequence. It's the same thing like I was talking about earlier with the requirement to get signatures for speed bumps. And this relates directly to the question. But if you have to get 80% of the people on your street to sign a petition to get speed bumps, but you live in a neighborhood where you have high fences and dogs or a lot of multifamily units that you can't get into, it's very difficult to meet that barrier. And so while this might be a well-intentioned policy, it's actually stood in the way of empowering these communities and making sure that they have the traffic safety measures that they need.
Yeah, so walkability shouldn't be a privilege that only wealthy white neighborhoods enjoy. It doesn't take a genius to notice that College Avenue and the Rockridge corridor looks very different than Hagenberger or San Leandro Street around here. How did we get here and why did this happen? Top-down policy planning and environmental racism, simply put. It's the same reason that Oakland has so many highways cutting through it and the city of Berkeley does not. I will be legalizing neighborhood markets so that we can have more walkability in our neighborhoods. We also need to understand the importance of narrowing the right-of-way so that we don't give such a large share of our cities to cars instead of people. When I reviewed Oakland's 8-year housing plan, one of my #1 priorities was making sure that East Oakland, Deep East Oakland, and West Oakland got tree canopy the same way that parts like Rockridge do. Tree canopy is a privilege. We need to have these walkability and amenities. And yeah, we need to acknowledge this history of environmental racism, do this right. It shouldn't just be co-working spaces in Rockridge and manufacturing around here. The land use really matters, and we need to pay attention to these things.
All right, that's all the questions that were submitted ahead of time that we prepared. Before we go to closing remarks, I want to give an opportunity for members of the audience to ask any questions that they have. If anyone wants to raise your hand.
Sure, thank you. I just, as someone who is familiar with SeeClickFix and knows that it's hard to navigate, but I haven't thought much about it, and I'm sorry if I'm not sure if everyone is familiar about it, but since a few people brought it up, does anyone have any ideas on how, I guess, to get community input on issues like potholes or streetlights in an equitable way?
So this was actually something we had to deal with when we were when we're operating the illegal dumping task force, because we wanted to make sure that all the illegal dumping was being reported quickly. And we realized very, very quickly, just by talking to the neighbors actually, that they did not believe that the SeeClickFix app worked, because a pile of dumping would get removed and then a new pile would come in and they'd report it, but the city maybe took 3 weeks to come out and get it. And so they just gave up. And so when I was telling them to use SeeClickFix, they were like, get out of here. I don't want to talk about that. And so what we actually had to do was start being proactive. So it can be one method that you use as a city to understand what's happening on the streets, whether it's potholes or illegal dumping or something like that. But you also have to have a proactive approach. And the city has created that, where now they have driving teams in the Public Works Department that actually go out looking for the illegal dumping. And so they actually target underserved communities where we know illegal dumping is happening, but it's not being reported as much, and that's really helpful.
So I have two ideas. This is just really specific to the app because I've taken a look at it. One thing is just one thing I've always advanced as part of my career is language accessibility, whether it includes languages and non-English as well as disability access. So I think that's two areas for improvement in the app, beyond just ensuring that people are actually using it. The other thing that, and I don't mean to point fingers at the people that are designing this app, but the way that it's designed, it's really lined up with how the Oakland bureaucracy is designed, rather than the way that a user would look at the app and just your normal person is thinking about Oakland. And so now that is pretty normal in government. But I would just say that we should redesign the app so it's really designed from the point of view from a citizen, not your bureaucrat. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. So I'm going to tackle it in a couple ways as someone who worked for the city of Oakland and worked for a council district specifically. And so one of the things that I focused in on was actually doing like individual trainings with like neighborhood groups. And so I would say that the downfall actually, in fact, around the SeeClickFix is I think communities are reporting the things that they're seeing, but they're actually it's actually not being followed up on. And so that was a lot of the work that I actually had to do was around contacting the Oak 311 manager and like getting them to move it along. And so I guess what I'm saying is like, hey, let's not discredit communities that are definitely using it. Of course, there could be more. It could be more accessible. And then on that other note, I also got to work in the app design. We created a constituent app, and so I do know that within the city of Oakland, there's still some funding around like upgrading the app, which, as some folks said, we do need to improve it. With a lot of government things, and so I do think that it's all solvable. But ultimately, and then just really ensuring that community has the tools to access how to get this done.
I'm sorry, Charlene. It's a long cord. I'm so nervous about your can too, Erin. Okay, thank you. I'm a frantic speaker. Yeah, so I think this issue mirrors so many other issues where the city is chronically understaffed. And why is it understaffed? It's chronically under budget. So I want to talk about concrete plans to make sure that the city stays financially solvent. We own a ton of land in the city and publicly owned parking lots in the downtown. In some situations, they've been converted into mixed-use housing. And you know what happened? We got 30x as much dollars in property taxes. This is what we need to do if we want to fund a financially solvent city. There's great cities like New York that have hundreds of people cleaning the parks on a regular basis, and they're able to do that because they are dense, walkable cities that use their dollars responsibly. We can't build a city for cars and then be surprised when we don't have the dollars to clean up our roads and make sure that these apps are working. I share the frustration of so many people who navigate public services and don't have access or don't know where the status is on their different issues. We've all worked with the Public Ethics Commission. They're in the office like 4 hours a week, so we could do a lot better. We need to make sure our city stays financially solvent, use our resources more efficiently.
I have a question that I, as an individual, can ask. Speaking on the budget, as several candidates have noted, the way that we fund our Department of Transportation and their projects are often through grants, through bonds, through outside funding, not through regular, not through the general fund, not through regular funding from the city. Other cities have looked at this and decided, no, we need to be spending some of our general fund on maintenance to make sure that things like paving are a consistent service that are provided frequently. Is that something that you would support in Oakland? Right now, our general fund is pretty heavily dominated by police and fire, and there isn't much room for anything else. Do you think that that is worth changing, and how would you change it? Yeah. Basically, do you think that we should be funding more of our transportation projects from the general fund in a way that's more, where the funding is more consistent and reliable, as opposed to at the whims of grants and bond measures?
I will say that's a great question. And the general fund should be used for things like transportation. And that's why I go back to what I've been saying, which is people have to understand the derivative, speculative holdings built into the Oakland budget since the 1990s. I mean, just to give you an example, so not to be a little concrete, the Port of Oakland paid $2 million more in fees. You have a situation, these are old figures, but it's worse now. On average, banks charge an extra 1% in fees, gouging taxpayers for $2 billion off of Wall Street bonds that were sold back in 2008, 1990, and we're still carrying that. Now, people have to realize if you don't go there and wipe that out and deal with it, I grew up in New York City, as I said earlier. New York in 1970, it was 1980s, I think it was, 70s or 80s, I forget the date. You have to forgive me, I'm going on 73. But Big Mac took over New York City. Time's up. I'll just say one quick thing. Big Mac took over New York City. The bankers took over the city. The minorities, the poorest sections of the city were destroyed. And that's what's happened to Oakland in a big way. And if you don't face that and look at that, you'll never solve the problem to do the funding that you need to do to things like transportation, which is very important. Thank you.
I'd be tentatively supportive. I just want to be honest that we are facing a budget deficit, and we also have serious, public safety issues, and so I cannot make that commitment. I would say that certainly in order to do that, we would need to increase the general fund and ensure that we're generating more revenue. That's why a lot of what I'm running on does include these aspects of economic development, of bringing, for example, manufacturing jobs, but not, dirty manufacturing, clean manufacturing jobs, green manufacturing jobs that are going to generate better jobs while also increasing our tax revenue. I will say the other thing too is due to the bipartisan infrastructure law, we do have an incredible amount of surface transportation funding going out the door, including to our county transportation commission. Now, Erin may have some thoughts on that, but I do think that one of the things we need to do is advocate to our transportation commission to make sure that Oakland's getting our fair share of dollars in order to do those kind of street paving projects and maintenance and all of that, and et cetera. So yeah, that would be my comment on that question.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I would say conceptually, I agree that we need to be putting more funding into our transportation and repaving. I don't think realistically at this point that we can do it out of the general fund, just because the deficit that we're facing at the City of Oakland is a general fund deficit. And so until we can actually get that fixed, I'm not going to be putting more things into the general fund. Additionally, general fund isn't a sustained revenue source. It's something that can come and go because it's the general fund. It can be kind of put towards whatever the city council wants or the mayor proposes in a budget. That's why I was actually really supportive of Measure KK. It's a dedicated funding stream that goes towards transportation, and that's actually what created the Department of Transportation, OakDOT, in the city. And so I'd actually like to see us look at that parcel tax because it's a flat parcel tax. So I'm paying the same amount every year that somebody who owns a $5 million house up in the mansion in the hills is paying. Now, that's very different for me than it is for them. And so if we could actually make a progressive tax, not only would we increase the amount of revenue, but we could also lower the cost for low-income homeowners.
Yeah, so I want to mirror some of what Erin was saying because I think that parcel taxes are a great way to fund these type of measures long term. I came out in support of Yes on FF in the city of Berkeley. There's a lot of different pools of dollars that we can tap into. Gas tax dollars, for example, go way too heavily to paving roads and to highways. I'm also a big believer that we spend way too much money subsidizing vehicle ownership, and I think it's the elephant in the room for all of the work that we do. $2 million is what each lane mile costs. So a street like Hagenberger, which has 6 lanes on both sides, that's going to cost us $12 million for each mile. And we're going to have to do that about once every 20 years, maybe even less, now that our cars are getting heavier and heavier. I think one of the elephants in the room that we have to acknowledge too is the role of the port. They have a lot of very, very heavy trucks that drive through our city that expose us to disproportionate levels of pollutants. So, I think it's important to think about the role of manufacturing. I think there's also other important financial measures that we should be focusing on. Federal Highway Administration money, gas tax dollars. It could be a both-and situation, but there probably should be general fund line items for, green infrastructure and separated bike lanes and the like.
Thank you. Are there any more audience? Yes, there is an audience question. Great.
On that same through line, Shawn, around the Port of Oakland and addressing environmental and racial justice and the impact in East and West Oakland with the Port of Oakland, with the airport and also the 4th largest port in the Pacific. And what, if any, has been your engagement with the Port of Oakland, and what would your communication be in addressing environmental and social justice for these East and West Oakland communities?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. So I think it's really important to engage with the business community in all of its forms. The port is obviously a very large stakeholder. We have the longshoremen. I signed the No Coal Inside of Oakland pledge. Can definitely afford to deepen that engagement. But again, I think we need to acknowledge the role that incredibly heavy trucks have in exposing our disproportionately BIPOC population to disproportionately high levels of air pollutants. So that engagement can be a lot deeper, have a lot of work to do on that, but welcome further engagement and more dialogue on it.
Thank you very much for the question. I think, I've seen this a lot actually out in East Oakland, where we have a lot of light industrial areas that abut right up against residential neighborhoods. And every single time this happens, it causes problems, not only for the residents who have to suffer because of the air quality, the noise, or things like that, but it also causes problems for the businesses. They're constantly suffering from complaints, they're getting pushed out and things like that, and that takes jobs away. I think when we're planning and we're talking about zoning, we have to be very careful about how we're doing it. This is that environmental racism that we're talking about, because when you put houses right next to a factory, who's going into those houses? And so we really have to look at that. And when we're talking about the port right now, we have Howard Terminal over there, and there's been proposals to put housing right there, right next door to Schnitzer Steel, right next door to the port. I think we have to be very careful about continuing that legacy of environmental racism and furthering it. Even though we all want more housing, we have to be really intentional about where we're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I see the port as having a complex relationship with the city in part because, yes, it is a contributor, obviously, to environmental racism and pollution. My job at the EPA is actually as an advisor in environmental justice and civil rights. That is, I help communities actually hold corporate polluters accountable. Here in Oakland, I do think that, you know, one of the things that we really need to address, for example, this is why I had recommended to Secretary Buttigieg that we fund that project out in West Oakland to do something about the highway, whether it's reconnecting it, capping it, something. But I knew that area is incredibly affected by air pollution, in part because my grandparents lived in the subsidized housing right off the highways. I will say, the other thing, too, that I want to make sure is important as part of this conversation about environmental racism and climate justice is as we transition and we decarbonize, we have to make sure that the most underserved communities are brought along in the transition, especially in the jobs. And that's why I'm actually running on this platform of bringing green manufacturing jobs to repurpose some of the existing industrial zoning into these light manufacturing jobs to produce, for example, solar panels that will ensure that communities that, for example, don't have as much access to college degrees are having pathways to the middle class because too many folks are also living paycheck to paycheck here in Oakland.
Well, ports are a great thing, and we need to make it very productive. It brings in trade, development, and, let's go nuclear. Let's get nuclear power. Let's get this city energy developed. Let's actually make some breakthroughs in fusion power. I mean, that's the kind of thinking we need right now, not Band-Aids. We're not going to die from climate change. What's creating the problem is not man-made carbon. There's a thing called the solar system and the Milky Way and intergalactic. And I can see some people laughing. That's okay. I don't mind it. But that's real science. That's why we have to have a space program. And I knew this crowd might not like me saying that, but that's okay. But that's real science. In 1960s, thank God, JFK took us to the moon. And the people who shut down that project were the problem that caused the climate problems that we have. If we had explored that, if we had nuclear power, if we had fusion energy 30 years ago, imagine what we would have today. And that's the legacy of the United States of America. And I can say that being almost 73 years old and grew up in a completely different time when science and technology and classical culture was what gave us today some of the greatest breakthroughs we have. And you should think about that. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking this question. One of the things that really inspired me to go to law school and to study environmental law is around just the environmental injustices that we see in our communities. And so I got to do some work with some of the Communities for a Better Environment. They do a lot of work in East Oakland, and a lot of their advocacy was around mitigating the AB&I foundry. And so a lot of their work and a lot of the work that we were able to do basically ended up getting that industry removed. And now kind of present day, the work I've been working along with the port, along with the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project. And this is a group of West Oakland community members that are focused in on, improving air quality in the area. And so I had the privilege of working on a bill, AB 2851, that was actually just signed by the governor, working to regulate the metal shredding industry, which is an industry located in West Oakland that has been polluting the West Oakland community literally for decades. So that's just some of the work, right? So this is kind of a conversation for me, not necessarily about what I'm going to do, but it's more like what I'm going to continue to do, already rooted in the community, working on a lot of these matters that really will help push Oakland forward.
Great. Thank you all so much. And thank you to the audience for the questions. I'm sorry, we need to go to closing statements now. I apologize. So we're going to give each of you 2 minutes for a closing statement. We're going to start in the middle again. Maybe Erin, would you like to start with yours? Great. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here tonight to speak with you, to share a little bit about my vision for Oakland and for District 5. As I've mentioned a couple times throughout the conversation today, whenever we're looking at the problems that Oakland is facing, we have to bring real solutions. We have to bring comprehensive solutions that not only work to prevent the issue, but also look at addressing the immediate impacts and looking downstream as well. So we need comprehensive solutions. And the way that we can do this is by building coalitions, bringing people together. And this is what I've done throughout my career. I mentioned the Alameda County Illegal Dumping Task Force, that we've removed over 500 tons of illegal dumping. That wasn't me out there removing 500 tons with a garbage picker. That was me empowering our local residents and businesses in partnership with government and making sure that that's what we're doing. Those are the types of scale solutions that can be replicated, that can be scaled up throughout the entire city. To actually match the scale of the problems we face, because the problems we face in Oakland right now are vast, and we can't keep tinkering around the edges. We can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. This is a time for change. This is an election for change. This is why I'm running, because we need comprehensive solutions that are actually going to address our problems, fix the root causes, and provide real solutions to the city of Oakland. I can't do it alone, though, and that's why I'm asking all of you to join me in making this vision for Oakland a reality. So I really appreciate your time today. You can go to voteforerin.com to learn more and to get involved with my campaign as well.
Thanks. Is this 1 or 2 minute? 2 minutes. Great. Thanks so much for the time, everyone. Really grateful for the work of Transport Oakland, and I think it's so important to center environmental justice in these conversations. I just want to celebrate how far we've come as a community in this conversation, and really centering environmental justice and realizing the impact that building our cities for cars have had. And so, you know, crossing the street should not be the most dangerous thing we do, but it absolutely is across the city of Oakland. And walkability shouldn't be a privilege that only wealthier, wider neighborhoods enjoy. We need to be planning for way more tree canopy. We need to be planning for way more neighborhood markets. We need to build a human scale version of Oakland. And I am the candidate who will understand the connection between economic and environmental justice. Cars are insanely expensive. We spend trillions of dollars, literally with a T, trillions of dollars subsidizing car ownership in this country, and it's still one of the largest drivers of poverty. A large share of Americans cannot afford a surprise $400 bill. And how much does it cost to replace your tires on a car? So we need to be planning our cities for people and not for cars. We can do so much better to make our cities walkable and human scale, give people their space back. We should be planning greenways to go across the cities so that we can be surrounded by nature and interact with our neighbors. We need to be investing in our third places, and that's why I'm going to be proposing a neighborhood market program so that we can go places outside of our home and our work and be part of our community. I'm so grateful to be doing this work with you all. Please learn more about the pro-housing, pro-mobility candidate in the race at DaninoForOakland.com. Thank you so much for the time and for the space.
Okay. All right. Well, I thank Caleb.
Sorry, we're going to finish the line, so Rowena speak first.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure. And so, you know, I'm grateful for the work of, of this organization. And I'm really focused in on ensuring that there's a lot of work to do in our city. Especially in East Oakland, especially in West Oakland. There's so many communities that, do not feel safe, walking across the street, driving, biking. And so we have a lot of work to do. I'm really going to be focused in on ensuring that we actually have walkable neighborhoods. And I think maybe the last thing of note is, there's about 10 candidates running for Oakland City Council at large. Please keep in mind that it is ranked choice voting. And, of the 10 candidates, I am the only candidate that is endorsed by our local Democratic Party, as well as, the current council member that serves in this role, which is Rebecca Kaplan, who has been a huge advocate in the transportation space, working on behalf of Oaklanders for about a decade now. And so I would be really honored to have everyone's support. You can learn more about my campaign at rowenaforoakland.com.
I want to thank Caleb and our timekeeper and everybody here. And what I want to close with, I want to share my vision of Oakland. I want to create a $100 million investment that will include contributions to the city of Oakland, individuals, Oakland companies, and businesses to launch a venture into the future. This investment will allow Oakland to become self-sustaining through profitable investment. Backing this bank would be an investment board of accomplished visionaries like Elon Musk. Invest 5 to 20 million in new companies that would be located in Oakland that would take 20% of the equity. The city and business provide support, and there are many creative and talented individuals who would jump in, because there are many creative and talented individuals here in Oakland who could think like an Elon Musk, in our children, in our future generations. And I want to inspire that for Oakland. And that's why I'm running for Oakland City Council at large. And that's why, as I said earlier, that's why I support Donald Trump for president, because with him in the White House, we will have a federal government that will work with us on all the profound issues, like getting rid of the drug cartels, like credit for these kinds of projects. And so if you want somebody different, somebody who's not part of the usual crowd, you'll vote for me. And you'll vote for Donald Trump. But if you're not, I know who you'll vote for, but that's okay. I'm putting my ideas at the table. I know that what I'm saying fits with a lot of people in Oakland. Because I'll tell one quick story before I pass the mic over. I was out campaigning in Oakland with my literature table for me and Donald Trump. And I can tell you, a lot of Black and Hispanic workers came up to me saying, I'm voting for Trump. I'm going with you. I used to work when Trump was president, but now I'm not working. So, there is a real change that's needed. So I'm going to leave my comments there. You know my thoughts, and I appreciate everybody being here. And we've got to create a big vision, because the usual steps that have been taken are not going to work. So thank you all, and I'll pass the mic over to Charlene.
Thanks, Mindy. And thank you guys for hosting this forum. I thought it was just really cool to be able to talk in the weeds about some of the topics that we don't get to normally talk in some of the other forums. I would like to talk with some of you about the MUTCD and the opportunity to update it and being able to, for example, incorporate artistry and whatnot into, for example, crosswalks and bike lanes and things like that. But nonetheless, what I would say is in Oakland, we are facing unprecedented times and unprecedented challenges and limited resources. And so what we need is really city leadership that is willing to get into the weeds to really reform the systems that we have. I've done that type of work. I've reformed the homelessness system out in Massachusetts to actually respond earlier and at a lower cost and to take people off the streets quicker. I've been deep in the weeds of organizational charts, figuring out how to look at how to better restructure city government to function better. This is the kind of stuff that we need here in Oakland, because all the, things that I said before. And I know that, sure, I know some people have criticized my campaign and saying that I haven't been here for a very long time. But what I would say is I am here to provide new perspectives from governments that have been more functional than here in Oakland, and I can provide that. And also, in addition, to also access the historic levels of funding that we've achieved through the Biden-Harris administration, whether it's the tax credits, the grants, Inflation Reduction Act, CHIPS Act, as well as the bipartisan infrastructure law. I helped shape those things, and I see the ways that Oakland is not benefiting and the way that our federal taxpayer dollars are basically going out to other communities and not enough to our own. So anyways, that is my pitch to you all, and hopefully I can earn your votes, and thank you guys for hosting this forum. Thanks so much.
Thank you all again so much for thank y'all all so much for attending. Great to have you. Feel free. There's still more food and, as many minutes of chatting with people as you have. And yeah, thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone.